Professors Blake and Professors Minford, the analysis of the economists from free trade is something of an outlier amongst major economists, and most studies, including the UK government's analysis, which followed the Scottish government's analysis, which was then again with the government of the Irish Republic's analysis, indicated most of the same general pattern of a 2% to 8% damage to GDP from Brexit. And if we think back to the 2008 economic crash, that was a 2% event to GDP. So we're talking of a scenario where Brexit would mean the same as 2008 over 12 years, or 4 times 2008 crash over 12 years. But your analysis is very different. Your analysis shows that depending on the trade policy the UK adopts, leaving the EU could benefit between 2 and 4%, as you've said this morning, Professor Minford. Why are you finding so different from the general consensus of economists that we've just heard from?
Well, let me explain a few intellectual facts about this area. Let me start with the Cross-Whitehall study, which has concluded that the early Treasury modelling approach was wrong. This is an important thing to take on board, because the early Treasury modelling approach in 2016, pre-referendum, a very big volume, as you will all recall, which came up with these numbers you're talking about, these orders of magnitude, was based on a series of correlations between different sorts of trade agreements and trade, different levels of trade and FDI, different levels of FDI and productivity. These are all correlations which have no causal implications. Correlations and causation, as you know, are a different matter. And what the Cross-Whitehall report came up with, and those correlation approaches were shared by all the modelling groups that Professor Smith has referred to, LSE, National Institute, OECD, Sussex. They all shared this same kind of correlation-based approach, which they called the gravity approach. Of course, it wasn't really the gravity approach, a bunch of correlations which were said to come from the gravity approach. But unfortunately, this is not a causal model. The Cross-Whitehall report that recently came out came to the conclusion that this methodology was flawed. You shouldn't use correlations, you should use a causal model, which is a computable general equilibrium model. And so they went to the leading internationally based operation that produced such a model, which is GTAP, the Global Trade Analysis Project at Purdue University. And so they completely changed the model from what Professor Smith is saying and what all these groups did, because they recognized that the models they were using weren't causal. If you don't have a causal model, you can't understand what a big change like Brexit will do to the economy, because you have to input it, and it changes everything. It also, unfortunately, invalidates Professor Smith's partial equilibrium modelling, which is all based on the assumption that everything will remain the same, apart from the little bits he's looking at. So that's the fundamental starting point you have to come from. Now, all along, in fact, our group have pursued a computable general equilibrium model approach. We built our own model in Cardiff, and we tested against the UK facts. We've also got a gravity version of this model, which puts in all the things that Professor Smith and his friends love, gravity, relations between trade and FDI and productivity, a high degree of imperfect competition, so that, there's not so much competition as in a classical trade setup. And what we find is that this gravity version is rejected by the UK facts. The UK is not really a gravity economy. It's very widely flung. It trades all over the world for historical reasons. So it doesn't really fit the gravity model. But if I can just finish, the last point we discovered is that if you do believe a gravity model and you write down a proper causal gravity model of computer general equilibrium, and you put Brexit into it, it comes up with the same answer. Because what Brexit does is it changes the whole basis of competition within the economy, and even in a gravity version of a computable general equilibrium model, you find that it has the same effect on the economy, of boosting competition and bringing down prices. So of course, that's common with the gravity causal model, as opposed to all these correlation-based models and partial equilibrium models that Professor Smith